What do we have here? A special Friday afternoon stream. You guys have been hanging with the Badge Bros in the Deposit Kingdom Discord. You've been watching their streams, and I said, hey, let's do one on my channel. Let's chop it up. I need to get in these underdog streets here. We're going to talk about Week 11 Battle Royale. We're going to talk a little bit about playoff contests and introduce those of you who have not experienced yet the Badge Bros. Let's do it. And let's dust off my old best ball intro.
Oh, another Influencer 101 for the backward hats, bro. Rigged!
Zach Ertz with no Tyler Algier bringback? Yikes.
You reached around for correlation? That's a no-no. You ADP bros disgust me. How about you just live a little?
Handcuffing might actually be a way to get unique if the field's avoiding it.
The Wi-Fi at this resort is a disaster?
These fucking streamers don't have player takes. What if a piss boy draft is the room you need?
Oh!
Ahoo. It's the Badge Bros. John, Neumy, Nez. How we doing, guys?
Doing great, man. It's great to be on here. A little like foreshadowing in that hype video with the handcuffing. I mean, what if the Deontay Foreman CMC drafts are what you needed?
Yeah, I mean, but that's unwitting handcuffing, right? Like you didn't go into that with the intention. You lucked out with a nut out there, I guess.
We're all just hoping to get lucky, like John. No one runs purer than John in these rooms.
That Influencer 101 slapped hard. I was like, oh yeah, I get it now. I got it now. I understand.
Look at this. So for those of you guys who aren't familiar, you've heard me reference the Badge Bros on shows. And if you're in the Deposit Kingdom, you've seen their new channel. These guys have been doing daily streams over. Look at this guy. Got his Deposit Kingdom mug. Been doing daily streams over on their channel. I got the links all down below, but I felt like we need to do like a proper kickoff stream. I've been on your guys' show. You guys haven't been on my channel yet. And truthfully, I've been like legit jealous of how much time you guys are able to devote to these underdog contests, because I'm a masochist that overcommitted to like DFS content. And I'm sitting over here looking over his shoulder being like, I wish I was just playing underdog all day like you guys.
Next year, man, you can switch up the schedule. I will say it was funny this morning. You guys were talking about. I didn't tell John that you guys were talking about Badge Bro stuff because I didn't want him to clip another mention of it. Yeah, you guys were talking about about how much time we have, and yeah, it's just it's just the way that things worked out. But it's been a ton of fun just going hard in this and chopping up with everybody and just seeing these contests grow. Is really cool, and hoping that we can continue to see some more growth moving forward in these as well. But it's been a lot of fun.
Here's a question for you guys, because like for me with I could blast off on the football ones. Like I feel like I'm up on football news and stuff. I could get it in good in most drafts, but you guys are doing all of the sports, and I know there's like transferable things as far as like tournament strategy and game theory that are applicable. But like, how much in general do you feel like you need to be super in the weeds on NBA day-to-day stuff, or when you guys were doing MLB or whatever? Because to me, it sounds overwhelming, but like, do you guys have a process for it? Like how much time investment is actually needed to be great at each one of these individual sports?
I'm hell-bent. I am hell-bent on proving that you do not need basketball knowledge to win basketball. And I'm going to prove that shit to everybody. I'm going to be the case study, exhibit A, that the fake ass hoops guy is going to come in here and just start scooping. I think there's a lot to be said that there was a cool quote in our chat the other day that everybody's allotted 30 seconds. Everyone has the same 30 seconds to work within. So as much as everybody's up on the news and has projections and all that sort of stuff, when you're on the clock, when you're faced with those decisions, can you build strong, structurally sound, correlated lineups that give you an out at the top prize time and time again? I think that's most important and most applicable in football. I think it would be next in baseball. I'm slowly learning that NBA is a bit of a you need to really be up on the last minute news kind of stuff like that. But I think just like in general, to answer your question, I think there's a lot of macro level stuff that we can implement that works across all of it. And then the player takes and the player news is almost a secondary additive.
Yeah, I don't think you can come into the NBA streets completely blind and expect to like profit. You definitely need to know like what are good matchups, like who is in a good spot and who isn't. But with big NBA slates, like anybody can definitely ship those. But I will say, like with NBA and baseball as well, there are a lot of names that you'll see at the top, like every single slate. Like basketball, like T-Box is up there like all the time. Rorschach is up there all the time. And another like popular red badge names, like they are always up in like the top 10. It's actually like pretty impressive. And MLB is a pretty similar way too. We had our arch nemesis in baseball. His name was Just Brett. He's up there a lot. So there's definitely it's really sharp in those rooms. Whereas football, because it's so, the sample size is so much smaller, so much more variance. It's not so much as like the same cast of characters over and over, unless it's Neumy and John in the big money slates.
Yeah, for me, it's just I think NBA, you definitely need to know a little bit of background knowledge and just maybe know how basically the teams work just a little bit, and how just you need to know a little bit of background knowledge. Otherwise, you can just kind of go in there with projections and just kind of load them in there and draft. I would say the easier sports, like for like just anyone hopping in, would be MLB and NHL, because you can get different you can get different off those top names, and being an event-based sport, like the projections mean nothing. You know what I mean? Like a projection of 12.7 in baseball is a figment. Like no one's ever going to get 0.7. There's no way to do it. So you can really exploit those sports. Whereas you come into NBA and you're not going to be bypassing the top first 2 rounds. Whereas you could hypothetically go into a MLB draft and be like, you know what, I'm just going to draft these 2 teams, skip the quote unquote best plays, and you can easily, you have a good enough chance as anyone else if they're just going in there drafting off rankings. So it definitely matters a little bit sport. I'd say NBA is just a little tough, where it's just, the breaking news nonstop, whether it be someone is now questionable or someone is now healthy who was just questionable the night before, type things, like minutes before the slate, hours, that stuff you do need to be up to date on. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, you can kind of go in there with a little bit of baseline knowledge and still do well.
And what do you, for people who are wanting to dip your toes, obviously hopping in the Badge Bros channel in the Discord, because you guys are talking about this stuff around the clock, is it having a base set of projections? How important is correlation in these other sports relative to football? Because I know even with like the full best ball drafts on Underdog, with basketball, like the positional stuff wasn't as important as it is for football. So I'm curious, like for people like me who are interested in dipping their toes in, like what are the things that we need to be aware of?
I think everybody wants that one size fit all answer, and it just doesn't exist. It is so slate specific, and it's so cliche to say it, that it's slate specific, it's sports specific. Like even myself with the football, like I've had completely different strategies for different weeks. Like last week, I got hyper exploitative with the Josh Allen and Diggs stuff because it was readily available, because Josh Allen was all of a sudden, a back end pick. And then I was building a large volume of teams, and I was just kind of like, well, I'm just going to ape right into that. So I think your strategy for sport to sport and whatever, it's determined by how many entries you're willing to put in. It's all a risk tolerance threshold in that regard. So how many entries you plan on taking. But then I think you can win both by getting hyper exploitative and just targeting these players on a given week, whereas other weeks I don't think that's as viable a strategy. So that fluctuates in slate to slate, sport to sport.
And as it relates to basketball, and you can expand on this as well, Neumy, like you grind basketball like the most out of all of us. And Pete, you talked about it with Brick, about like to be a professional like NBA, or like you guys were talking about MMA as well, to do it on a DFS slate, and it's the same type of grind on these streets as well, because we're drafting. You have to be tapped into the news like crazy hard. Like you have to be able to make those late swaps for like the West Coast games where LeBron is a late inactive. Now you're playing like Kendrick Nunn and then swap. Like it's insane, like how much round the clock tinkering it takes. And it goes the same with us, except we have a nice cutoff where, like once the first game starts, drafts are done. So you can kind of like set back and kind of watch, but maybe adjust your swap rankings, because we are at the mercy of automated swap rankings. But basketball, definitely, you really have to be in tune. And then baseball, there is stacking as well. I think where the what's interesting with baseball too, just real quick, we didn't have ADP in baseball for like all of the year.
Half the year. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like only the underdog rankings, and then like it was like, hey, you got to do your own research, and if you know, and if you know, you know. And then we got ADP, and then that kind of changed things as well, because now you can even get more exploitative with the off the chalk stuff, because the chalk is so elevated that people are, and it's baseball, like Neumy said, it's so event based. So like anything like can literally happen. Like the best player can put up a 0. That just does not happen in football or basketball. Like, and so that makes that interesting. But Neumy, you, like I said, you grind basketball a ton, so you can
just
attest
the two
to that.
things is that ADP thing. We called it the Ohtani situation, where every time Shohei Ohtani would pitch, he would be projected as a 0, and he would never be a pitcher on Underdog, but he would still hit.
You could get points for his.
You
his
get
hitting.
points for his hitting,
Yeah,
but he would be a 0. So when there was no ADP, I mean, if you were drafting the night beforehand, I mean, it was basically like, you know, that's when the badges. If you get a no badge room, you can kind of push it and try to see how low you can get. Because in theory, Shohei would be a first round, second round pick, but you could kind of. But then when we got ADP, and it just, I mean, that's out of the window. He's still projected ADP like 10 or something like that, and it would slowly move up. Just the one thing about base.
Oh no.
In terms of
you're back.
Yeah. Am I back? Yeah, I apologize. I don't know. It does this every single time. So yeah, I probably just missed.
It's one and done. It's one and done.
But in the correlation thing. So with basketball, it's like the only way you really get correlation is like a point, like basically a point and an assist. So like there's not much correlation in the sport of basketball. So like basically trying to stack teams is kind of like the newbie thing normally in NBA DFS is like, you don't really need to do it at all, because there's really no correlation in it. Versus baseball, you know, the correlation of a batter getting on base, someone hitting them in, like there's correlation to that. So it's obvious, like stacking components. Same thing with like an NHL and just like your bringbacks for like football and whatnot, or just your stacks there. So it's just like in the macro sense of that, just knowing like what you don't really need to stack an NBA going in like that. But that's just kind of like the macro sense that I kind of bring into that. So just knowing that you don't really need to full in go, if I got a guy in the first round, I need to bring him back with some random guy. Basically, like you don't need to sacrifice like that projection at all.
What that brings me to my next question. So let's talk about like the football stuff. And John, you were saying how like the edges on each slate, you know, might be different, or how you want to approach it as far as what you think your edge is. Like, where do you guys think in general? Because I know there's a lot of people, we talk a lot about like how efficient and how sharp a lot of the DFS stuff is. This is such a new game format. There's still so little data we have. I mean, you guys are, we have a thread now in the Deposit Kingdom Badge Bros channel where you guys are compiling, you know, ADP and trying to pull some combinatorial ownership stuff, which is very cool. But where do you guys think right now the biggest edges are in these battle royales? Is it doing drafts early? Is it hunting for inefficiencies in ADP? Is it going way overweight on a spot? Like, I'm just curious how you guys think people can realize the edge in such a new format.
I'll let John go first, because I think
we're probably all going to say like the same thing. I feel like go ahead, John. I wonder what you're going to say.
Well, I think it's less player take dependent and more giving yourself a path to first place with the players in which you select. And JM came on the show yesterday and painted it like very eloquently when he said that it doesn't matter who you take in the first round, because just assume that player succeeds. And what else would we need to then happen? And he basically said, create an if-then statement with your roster that if we happen to get Saquon this week in the first round, well, then what else do we need from this roster to go correctly? Because if we get Saquon in the first round, it's then basically a bet against Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs. So now let's shape this roster as Saquon's the highest player on the slate. Let's go from there, right? And it's the cliche that you always used to talk about, Pete, about telling a story. That's literally what we're doing. We're like as simplistic and like as like kind of bro science as that advice is. Like, no, let's tell a story with each of these rosters, regardless of who we draft with the first pick, right? And I think it's one good point about that is everyone always thinks about telling the story with the players you pick, but the players you're not picking are telling a story as well too. And so that's, I think, a good way to think about that as well. But it sounds like you guys had some other thoughts on that, Nez. What were you gonna say?
Yeah. I think So this slate, probably not so much of this being the edge, but I think crucially, like the edge is volume. And because we're drafting it in rooms, like each room is different. It's not like we have the same 36 guys every time that we're picking from, and they go in the same order every time. Like it happens where people will post a sick team they drafted, right? Like, oh, check it out, I got Saquon and Josh Allen and Diggs. And it kind of pisses you off a little bit. It's like, well, shit, man. Like, I wish I could have had that. Well, you can have it, and that's like part of Underdog's business model is 150 max entries. Like, if you want, like, quote unquote, the best shot, draft a lot and be ready for when you get that lobby where a guy with the 6 ADP falls to pick 12, and you're like, well, I never get this. And then like it's like, well, why do I never get this? And it's like, what changed? Did anything change? Of course, you kind of have to be in the know with the news if there's a reason why a certain guy is falling. But the reason I say like maybe not so much this week is because like all the talk has been about how gross this slate is, right? Like there's no games that, like the highest total is Browns Bills 49.5, no game over 50, a few games over 45.5. So reaching now and like as far as like value hunting, being a value hound, you're sacrificing like less points as you would on a normal slate where like it's absolutely stacked with studs. Now it actually makes more sense to like get off the board and like maybe get cute at more than one position rather than like what's been the typical meta, which is like get your studs and then mix it up with just one piece. Neumy, what are your thoughts?
Well, just and this is gonna tingle John here when I say from a macro sense of Underdog. For me, like the edge, when I think of an edge, and this is, I forget who said it, but it's being the big fish in the small pond. And that kind of resonated with me is like, if you struggle just with the reason why we do these dailies here, if you struggle with DFS, which a lot of people do, I mean, it's hard to win. We understand the GPP, like you come over here and Mark just touched on it. How, I mean, we sampled all of this DFS data for how many years? 4 years. And someone said that basically like, it's still not enough to figure out who's like a good winning player. This has been going on for what, like 2 years? We've had full battle royales, like, and now we're slowly starting to get it. Like some people will look at this data and they think it's gospel after just a couple weeks, even just 1 week. And then they go, oh, we have 2 years of data. It's like, this is such a new just game environment that we're all figuring out. Like that's the edge to me, is that you're trying to figure it out together. And it hasn't been, it's the furthest thing from solved, just like best ball. So if you just port over DFS knowledge, it's like basically, to me, it's like you're getting into DFS kind of at the beginning. Like this is a brand new game. And you can just, I mean, having it be a market and dictating in that sense, you can really find your leverage and be exploitative however you want to play. So that's
have
the
you guys,
macro sense.
Like if I've thought a lot too, and it sounds like this dovetails to what Jam was saying, and I bet you guys agree too, as far as like when you look at, say, on these battle royale slates, most of them, like maybe you could extend it to 10 players, 11 that have like certain ceilings, and then everyone else is kind of in a wash beyond that. And if you have good ADP later in the week, have you guys ever just like almost outlined what you want your exposures to be? Because you could roughly be like, I want to build 15 Justin Fields stacks, and I want to mix and match my Mooney, my Komets, my that, and then like hit those benchmarks? Or do you guys still go into every draft being like, I want to be reactive in case this one guy falls? But my thought is like, yeah, occasionally you'll get a guy who falls, but for the most part, you could pretty much script out the exposures that you wanted and then just go in and do those in an almost automated fashion.
I do it every week. I build them in Excel first. I go, yeah, I want this build. I want this build. I want that based on ADP. And I go, okay, now I've reached 40 drafts and I have 36 of those builds that I wanted. Yep. Okay. But I'm always wary and reading and reacting to the room, because if I get a badgeless room, for instance, and all of a sudden pieces are there that like combinatorially, I do not believe will be there later in the week, then I deviate from my plan. So do I have a scripted plan? Yes. Do I have a scripted plan as to targets in which I want to pluck out at certain ADPs? Yes. Do I deviate frequently? Yes. So
that makes
go
ahead. No, I was just going to say you have those spots too where because like if you have a guy that say even, and I think it's probably more in the first round or second round too, right? Where it's like you have this guy who's going at 1-2 and you get him at 1-6, like then I'm way more inclined to take like the 1-7 because a lot of people aren't going to have that pairing or whatever. Whereas when you're going really efficient, that's where I find myself being like, all right, this ADP is by the board. I want to scroll. I want to get a little bit more unique. Whereas like I might just be unique with this one pairing or relatively unique.
That's sorry, there's one. I just want to add one point to that because that was something that we talked about on the show yesterday with Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson fell to us when we were drafting at like the 105, and then we had the debate whether we should pair him with CeeDee Lamb coming back around. And my take was we're forfeiting all of our leverage in pairing him with that because that pair would be available from the 103 or the 102 at other intervals. So we have to pair him with an individual who has a thrust up ADP like Justin Fields to then just get a unique combination in this spot. And it just plays to your point there, Pete, that I think that's a very sharp line of thinking, like in terms of like breaking up your draft board and plucking players from this side and this side in terms of ADP, because those combinations are less readily available.
Yeah, that's a good point. With like we said, it all comes down to like understanding the value that you're getting at the point in time, like at least for the first couple rounds. Or maybe if you get like a Mark Andrews in the third, then you should probably pull that trigger as well. I do have I have like based on where ADP settles, I have like my player targets, and then I have my player like avoids or like my fades, and I don't necessarily set like percentage targets, but I will try to monitor that. Like last week, I was so heavy on Amari Cooper, like, and that obviously like dusted me. And once I got to like 50% Amari Cooper at like 60 drafts, I was like, okay, let's chill out a little bit. Like, I think I pretty much got my bases covered there. Obviously that didn't hit. And then like this week for me, like I've been telling these guys on like every stream, like every moment in the private chats that like, I'm a Steelers fan, and I just like, and JM was talking about it, and like there was a Roto Grinder stream talking about it, and they're like everyone's talking about the Bengals, and like they like we want T Higgins, we want Tyler Boyd, and they're like the Steelers defense, like they keep harping on like the Steelers defense not being good. Well, they didn't have TJ Watt for the entire season. They had him for 1 week. Well, now 2 weeks. It's truly a completely different defense when he's on the field. It's literally like a completely different team. So, like
20 minutes in, we got Nez talking Steelers already.
I had to.
I was like, how did we get to this Homer rant?
So to me, it's like I see an edge, and like now that like I know the public is like not scared of them at all, like it just makes me want to just like lean even more into that like I'm the only one that thinks that I have an edge here. I'm going to try to capitalize on that. So. And that happens every week where I'll see a guy that's like a high in ADP and I'm like, you know what? Like I know that I'm going to be below average on them, but otherwise I do try to spread my exposures around because I don't want to get too like take locked where like last week I was so convinced Amari Cooper was going to put up 13 point plus week against the Dolphins. And like that dusted me. So I do try to like have a little bit of humility in my takes, but I don't have like a percentage like target necessarily. It just kind of organically comes out to me being like 27% Ramondre Stevenson as of right now. So don't even feel great about that.
Have you guys seen anyone, or have you guys yourself like approached it in the same way you would have like a 150 maxer in DFS where they might just be like, I'm just locking this stack, and say it's a cheap stack that you can get routinely in the third and fourth round of every draft? Like, have you guys played a slate like that where you think that's fully your edge? Like, I'm just going all in on this stack and I want every possible combo around that.
I do it more so with a naked player. I do it more so with like a back end one-off, or I do it more so where it's like I want to consolidate exposure around that one player. I do like to get kind of random with skinny stacks in general. Although the Justin Fields week where I took down the bomb with him, I was very exploitative with Justin Fields that week, but I ran him naked. I didn't run him. I ran maybe 1 or 2 rosters with Cole Kmet, but I ran him naked. So I don't think it's as necessary in these contests because with 9 roster spots in like DFS, like the value of stacking is pretty heavily oriented around getting that third piece home. And I don't think that's necessary in these 6-man rosters where like I do much prefer skinny stacks. So I don't really want to pigeonhole myself to like one skinny stack unless that skinny stack was like last week where like Allen and Diggs was available so much later than it should have been. But I'm not going to do it with like Mariota and Pitts or, something of that magnitude.
I will say the one week that I did do it, I ended up winning 10K. So maybe I should try to do it a bit more with
What
the.
was it?
That was the week that Amon-Ra was out and the Lions played the Seahawks and Jared Goff went absolutely nuts and then Jacobs also went nuts and it was in the 12-man, the goal line stand, and that score in the 12-mans would have taken first in the Battle Royale. And I try not to think about that too much, but that's
clearly.
Neumy, question, because Nez is referencing. So for people who don't know, the battle royales, those are 6 rounds, 6-person drafts, but they also have similar format, except it's 6 rounds with 12 people drafting. I'm curious, how do you think about the strategic differences? Obviously the 12-person end up being smaller tournaments, but as far as like actual like porting strategy from battle royales over to those, how do you think about that?
So I think about it a little bit like I port DFS where it's, so just to put it in perspective, 51 entrants in the main and 1,100 in the goal line stand. So that 12-man. So immediately I'll stack more. Like I'll be more willing to get more pieces from one game because you just really don't need that outlier unless it's, Justin Fields and Cole Kmet that just bring it. But a lot of people are like John. He's more advocate to just do skinnies and to go naked quarterback and like to do that because he sees everyone stacking and doing all. And so, but here it's like I'm always targeting a back stack no matter what. I'm trying to set up a stack. So, and I'm always trying to bring back. So, on all of my goal line stand rosters, regardless if it's correct or not, I always have a stack and a bring back. So that's 3 out of my 6 roster spots are from one game, and depending on how, the game environment, what it is, I'd be willing to go another spot on there versus on the battle royale. We talk about, the 6-leg parlays and what you need to actually hit. That's what goes into it for me. And also just what is available to you in those later rounds is a lot of times a stack component to your quarterback and that's how it kind of plays out too. So
John, was that a reference that Neumy was kind of hinting at, that you think in general people are overstacking?
That's a loaded question because I don't want to be results oriented with how the chalk's been slapping and how like one-off pieces have been winning like so much through the first couple of weeks. I think in an attempt to get unique, you need to maybe skinny stack and single bring back. But I do think because it's only a 6-person roster that if we're trying to, let's just use like a isolated example, for instance, let's use Kyler Murray and like DeAndre Hopkins. If I'm going to run that stack from like last week, like what am I doing by throwing like Rondale Moore in there? Like it makes sense, like theoretically it makes sense, but like what's the ceiling of that player? And I think this might even be like a borrowed take. Like I think Herzig might have talked about it on our show at length as well, where it's kind of like, I want to be smartly correlated in terms of like, a quarterback with a pass catcher if that quarterback requires a pass catcher to get home. So like, let's profile a player like Joe Burrow, for instance. Like I'm more apt to stack Joe Burrow than I am to stack Justin Fields. I think that's a very simplistic, common understanding, but I'm much less inclined to double stack than I think the tendencies of the field are currently.
Yeah. And I think too, like you used the Rondale Moore example, the thing we always say with DFS is like, you're looking for the bringbacks that can actually speed up the game, right? Like that's you want. You want Justin Fields ripping off a 70-yard TD run and then Tyreek Hill having an 80-yard TD catch. And all of a sudden then we're just like off to the races. A guy like Rondale Moore, it's less likely that he's going to be doing that the way he's used. So I do think I've found myself, just because it's comforting, it's easy to fall into the stacking, the bring back stuff. And I do think you need to be a little bit more purposeful with it. And that's why it goes back to the thing about scripting out some of your stuff, right? Like you don't have to act shocked like in these drafts. Like you could know what you want to do heading into it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, yeah, if you've never done them, and another thing that's they added the training camp, but you can always look at the ADP in the rankings. So you can go to the rankings tab, pre-look at ADP, check all that out, like download that, and that's how you can just script out the drafts and see how they're going, versus you just
Yeah.
jump in there and you're like, oh, what's going on. So yeah,
And
this will give you.
I will say, I don't think that ADP right now, based because we've had so much news this week, is like fully efficient.
Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
people were so
Yeah.
tied into what ADP solidified at, and on like Tuesday, that Josh Allen is in a dome this week, and he's going below Justin Fields. Like that just we should honestly be like throwing some water on our faces at that. Like, and I love Justin Fields. I was poking fun of Neumy for wanting to like go elsewhere, like on the slate, like earlier this week, but like that was before Allen got the move. But like we
Mhm.
should be reacting a little heavier to this, and it's just kind of shocking that we're not. And that's just one example. And Mark Andrews now, I think if you click on the Mark Andrews news tab, Pete, I think this is like probably like one of my favorite edges right now today.
Yeah.
He is expected to be a game time decision, but what is like they're burying the lead, which is that he was a full participant in practice today.
Yep.
So he's falling. Like I just did like 3 drafts before this,
Yeah.
like, of course, and he falls to like the 3rd round now. So just like knowing like that there are these like little edges that I feel have like massive payoffs is when I should be attacking these heavier, when in reality I attack these heavy every week, regardless of whether I think I have a gigantic edge or not, because I'm a sicko and I'm addicted to this. But that's just like some examples of this week. Like I think a lot of people are looking for like binary answers, right? They want to know who
Yep.
like they want to know who the answers are. And well, right now, like this is just like not efficient.
Well, and that's what I mean. I'm pretty sure we talked about it in the Discord hang last week too, about like what would be the efficient 101. And I think if you had zero concerns about Mark Andrews' health, like he probably should be the 101 because it's actually a relatively flat tier at quarterback. Like if you go look at aggregated ceiling projections, Fields, Hurts, Lamar, and who am I forgetting? Allen. Well, actually, the 3 non-fields actually have higher ceiling projections. And so if that's the case, and we think the onesie is how you separate, and Mark Andrews clearly the only tight end on the slate capable of dropping 30, I mean, he probably should be the 101, right?
Yeah. I think we're going to look back and be like, holy shit, this was a little silly. But also, like, I kind of like 2 tight end builds this week. You talked about it on your show with JM, and how like salary wise it makes a lot of sense. And some of the best game environments have tight ends that have had like some pretty nice results and are in good environments and have been getting like not even just results, but just have like good run and are getting good targets. Like, yeah, Mark Andrews is a separator because Kelsey's not on the slate and like Waller it doesn't exist. There's actually like past that, like 5 or 6 options that I kind of like. And once you get rid of these like awesome wideouts, like I think these like some of the tight ends have like a lot safer floors than the rest of the wideouts that we're looking at as a flex position. Like Freiermuth, I think has been like even with Claypool there had good numbers, and now Claypool's out and they're going against Cincinnati, who's banged up on defense. That is exciting to me. Getting Komet and Schultz and just kind of like reaching because these ADPs are so low. And if people don't get Andrews, they're waiting, like just leapfrog them and grab like a Hawk and a Schultz or a Komet and someone else. Like I'm not saying do it every time, but I certainly think it's possible for this to be what you need this week.
And the only thing I would say, my thought on that would be making sure it's a guy preferably that has a little bit of either yards after the catch upside or deep downfield upside. You look at guys like Pitts and Dulcich, who actually have high A dots. The Higbee double tight end stuff, it's less attractive where it's like on DraftKings, you're getting the full point PPR. He can pay off a cheap salary. It's like you do really need, if you're flexing a tight end, like what you need 100 yards in a TD, most likely.
Maybe, but like look at the wideouts though. Like the wideouts below them, so past Gabe Davis, these guys are hard sells. Like they really are. I mean, yeah, they're wideouts and they're more explosive. They have like higher ceilings. I acknowledge that. I'm just thinking as far as like tight end or touchdown equity goes, I think we might want to look at the tight end position when you're looking at your flex spot. These aren't necessarily comfortable picks.
Well, and I would guess, I mean, tell me what the early data says. Combinatorial ownership on double tight ends has to be like nil, right?
It's less than
yeah,
8%.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Okay.
It's I'll tell you.
That's actually higher than I thought it would be.
Yeah, same here.
Oh, yo, it's actually way lower than that now. With 127 drafts in there, it's under 2%. It's 1.18%.
So I did one with like a Vikings shootout where I ended up taking like Jefferson, Hawkinson, and then I threw in Schultz. Like instead of doing like the typical, maybe like Gallup run back or Pollard run back, like I threw in Schultz there. And then I did one with Pitts and Andrews where with like Mariota, thinking just is getting like I kind of had to force a stack there. I was kind of in a rock and a hard place, but I'm trying it out. Seeing where it goes. I'm doing a fuck ton of these. Might as well just mix it up.
Well, I think in a vacuum, like it's a pretty polarizing conversation to have because like a lot of people will tell you you're lighting money on fire from a projection standpoint to take 2 tight ends in a 6-player build, blah blah blah,
right.
Ceiling. I think it plays a lot better in like the 3-person contests for like Monday night, Sunday night, and you're kind of taking an exploitative leverage standpoint there by taking 2 tight ends. I think it could definitely be more viable than people who have come on our show and stuff give it credit. Like I tend to lean in the direction of agreeing with you there, Nez, like where it's like, if I'm looking comparatively to on a very slate specific, like this one, if I'm looking comparatively like WR20 versus tight end 7, like I think the ceiling of like pairing Andrews and Pitts together probably opens up more than pairing like Tyler Boyd and Chris Olave. I kind of like Olave this week in a vacuum, but you know what I mean? Like just from like a namesake standpoint, I can get on board with that. And like the nice thing about tight end is the correlation with quarterback makes like the most slate from a roster or most sense from a roster construction standpoint.
And I do I think Andrews is almost like an exception because you're treating him like a wide receiver anyways. So then you're just filling your tight end. And then I think if I were to do it, it probably would be with a game stack where I'm like, I'm doing Schultz and Hawkinson, or I'm doing even like Knox and David Njoku. And you're like, this is the game that goes fucking nuts.
Exactly.
And these guys each score 2 TDs. Like, is that likely to happen? No. Is it within the range of outcomes? Sure.
Yeah, I think that was really like what I was trying to do is just get unique pieces of games because there's not a lot of sexy games, and now like trying to get unique in those games where everyone is targeting, where I think that like it is going to end up being like some major pieces of those games. Sorry, Shane.
No, just I mean, if you get 2 tight ends that hit that you need, I mean, your path to first is just it's right there for you. You know what I mean? Like it's just so simple. Like So in terms of getting like just flipping the build roster construction wise, that is 100%.
I've done it 3 times out of like my 70 drafts. So it's not like it's not a building block for me at all, but it looked good at the time. I was like, let me go ahead and throw this in there.
One thing that just from Pete's question, basically, would you ever just basically, if from a 150 max build of just going hyper exploitative, from what I've done in my 30 drafts I've done so far, I have 15 Lamar Andrews combos. And if they're going to be this gettable, it's like, give me as many as you can and I'll just diversify around it. Because like you said, Lamar or Andrews to me is a 101. John, I think, has felt that way. He's told us like on stream, like it should be Andrew, but you don't take Andrews at 101. You get as much value as you can from him. And he's going to continue to stay middling around there. So, I mean, and for me, it's Mark just selling me that if a pass catcher is doing that, Lamar's bringing him along. So if Andrews is hitting his ceiling and that ceiling, it's most likely Lamar's hitting it as well. So it's such an easy stack right there. And I mean, I've been getting a Jefferson with him, Diggs with him, Saquon I haven't got yet, but it seems like you could get that Saquon at 101 and then get in a room where Andrews and Jackson just fall to that 2-3 turn, and it's the easiest tap of your life. Like,
Yeah,
and I was gonna say, go ahead.
I was just gonna do a callback. Go ahead, John. Sorry, I apologize. I'm talking over you.
No. Go.
My callback was like, so we have these like elite quarterbacks here. And like I said, if you're not going to get Justin Fields or like Josh Allen and you think that you have a chance to win without them, you really have to tell yourself what's happening in those games that those guys aren't scoring. And then that brings us to some picks like David Montgomery down low. I actually am starting to warm up to Devin Singletary a lot more. And you can even go with Lamar. Like, okay, if Lamar isn't scoring, then it's a Kenyon Drake week. And with Jalen Hurts, it's Miles Sanders. Like, you really do have to think like, and with Justin Fields and Josh Allen in these smash spots, if they're somehow not hitting, like what's happening in that game if they're not. And so just like keeping that in mind, like you said.
Well, we finally have Allen flipping here in ADP. I don't know. What are you guys doing here? Are you taking the discount on Fields?
I would take Andrews Lamar.
So let's do that. And so then my next question to this, because obviously I would love, a 101 and then you get Andrews Lamar coming back. Are you guys worried because their ADPs are so correlated and it's so unlikely that someone's going to take Lamar without Andrews, that this Andrews Lamar pairing without the elite guy at the top is actually going to be pretty frequented?
No,
it's yeah, go ahead, John.
I mean, like, in general, like, yeah, I used to like think that way, like very heavily. But then when I start thinking about like the path to winning from like different like slots on the board, I want exposure in both capacities anyways. So I'm not deterred to start setting up a build from this side of the board to start with it. Because like, what's to say that Miles Sanders doesn't have the exact same score as Saquon Barkley this week, or because running back is very deep this week, that like I get less and less scared. And like, we love to think and we love to assume we know what's going to happen. We love to assume that we know Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver on this slate. Does he project that way? Yes. Will he be drafted that way? Yes. Will he be the highest scoring one this week? I don't know, 16% of the time. Like, so I think I would, I think I used to get timid in that regard. And now I just kind of accept the fact that like, I'm going to keep building around the components in which I want to build around and just do it different and intelligently.
Yep. To me, it definitely feels like a ceiling drop off at wide receiver after Higgins.
Yeah.
I like Terry a lot, but yeah. Higgins and Terry.
I like Higgins, and then one fun part about Terry is, not that a rookie corner, but the Texans' top corner did just get ruled out in Derek Stingley Jr. So just another depleted. He goes.
Bet he's on it.
That dirt on your hand, Neumy. Let's see it.
We've all got that's your company, man. We all got the Fantasy Life push notifications on.
Yeah, you need
not
it.
actually
you
affiliated with Fantasy Life, but that's a conversation for another day. Let's what pick do we want to do here?
So Gabe has been sold on me, and I would go Gabe, but
okay,
that's just to lock up again what I think is another wide receiver teardrop. I think those two are
I think Gabe is definitely undervalued right now as far as the ceilings go with these wideouts. I think taking Gabe in any build makes sense, even though you are kind of telling yourself Josh Allen's hitting. Well, now we are hedging that by saying, well, you know what, Lamar and Mark are actually going to match that. So it's either like you're either betting on these studs failing, or you're betting on like you can match it. And we are set up in a position where like we can totally match.
Do you worry at all? We were kind of talking about like what story you're telling. Like, we're now telling a story where Gabe has a ceiling game, but the other pieces there aren't getting there.
Well, I'll counter with this slate is so gross that he doesn't even need a ceiling game. He maybe just needs a one tutty, whatever. And like Allen gets there with two touchdowns, and it's Singletary getting in a defensive thing. So it's like, I totally agree with you. It's like, okay, if we're betting on the solo wideout, especially from a Josh Allen team, like Josh Allen's definitely getting there. I don't think it definitely says that he has to be getting. They both
scroll the F down, game. Pete. I think this is like a classic.
Montgomery.
Yeah, that's where my mind went. Mine was like Montgomery as like the one-off bet against Fields, and then just being like,
it's wild to me that Montgomery. I mean, I get that. I mean, I guess these guys are projecting better than Montgomery, but man, I do still love the leverage off of the Fields being a first round pick in all of these.
Exactly.
Couldn't agree more.
Yep.
Yeah, we've been talking up that Montgomery since Monday. That it's just like,
And
and
I
it
am
feels kind of
like,
gross to lean into David Montgomery. You could get gross and go 2 tight ends, Kyle
I was
Pitts,
just
Dixie
gonna
Slate, and then
Yeah.
and
You want to
then
do
run
it?
it
We
back.
just
I
put
mean,
all
we could do it.
the edge pieces we've been talking about here.
Yeah,
I'm into it, man.
I mean, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean Monty breaks off a nice, 50-yarder first drive, and then they gotta pass. They won't though, but Falcons gotta
Yeah, the
pass,
other-
and
This honestly seems foolproof for Kyle Pitts, man. Like,
Oh, don't say that, please.
Yeah.
Come on.
Lock it
There's
in.
there's no givens with fucking Kyle Pitts.
I know there isn't. I know there isn't. And for God's sake, man. Against the Bears, who just like they are what we thought the Lions were going to be. Like, now they're just this awesome offensive fantasy environment, and like I don't even think not even Kyle Pitts can fail in this environment. I'm gonna be so confident about that.
Jeez,
That was very fun draft board there. I think conventional wisdom might have strayed us to get Amari Cooper with that last pick,
Yeah.
because he's still on the board there, and wrap Cooper with Gabe Davis. Donovan Peoples-Jones, we talked him up a little bit on the show today, like 70 yards in 5 out of his last 6, was it? 70 yards in 5 of his last 6, and he still hasn't got those touchdowns yet. So if that volume's still there and the usage is still there, you could pick a path there. But I think you're instantly. I mean, Kyle Pitts' ceiling, is it that different from Amari Cooper? I don't know.
I think it's just a good exercise in general. I completely agree. My pick that I was going to float was Amari, because that was the one that felt comfortable. It felt logical. And then when you really pull back and you ask yourself that exact question, the ceiling conversation, and then you couple that, if the ceiling isn't that different, and then a double tight end build is going to be that unique, it's just like you almost would be dumb not to go in that other direction.
Yeah, that's what makes these conversations so fun, though, Pete, is like, as soon as we have a bigger, like, I always harp on the data sample size, because like in NFL, we've played a year and a half, basically 2 years of these contests, and that doesn't even amount to like 1 month's worth of NBA slates in terms of like information that we have to like back construct data. So like, yeah, maybe 2 tight end will look dumb in 3 years from now, but like maybe it doesn't when you bet on the player archetypes and portfolio that we're suggesting we're betting on in this given build, right? So in a vacuum, is it bad? Maybe. Could it be very viable? Maybe, right? Like it's very fun. It's very fun to talk through these, right?
And I will say, just in general too, like with this stuff, we talk, obviously with the NFL, we talk how it's so event-based and there's so much variance, but there is this stuff, like if you're willing to roll up your sleeve, like the stuff that I'm doing for DFS stuff is like being done by everyone and better by most of the sharps. Whereas if you're in here looking at this data, or you're plotting out, or you're just wanting to put in simple ceiling projections next to ADP and try to build out your own, simple optimizer type of thing, essentially, and build this out, like you are light years away of what the majority, like the 99 doing, like outside of the Bash Bros Discord. Like it is, if you want to roll up your sleeves, I do think the edges in these contests are very real.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I literally just put an Underdog, like a thing for the the NBA contest to have literally ceiling projection to ADP. That's just my one thing that I use to find value. It's just super easy when it's just on a sheet like that. So yeah, not many people are willing to do it. So.
And so I've been mentioning this on shows. We got the Badge Bros channel in the Deposit Kingdom Discord. Whether you're hopping into basketball, doing football, it is such a great resource. Lots of people to bounce ideas off of, even just by osmosis. Just if you're a lurker, even reading it, you will pick up on things. And then just also having some of the tools that people are putting together, ADP, aggregation and stuff, really, really valuable stuff. And it's always just a nice reminder of these guys will let you know when these contests open up and you're like, oh yeah, I should go hop in these early in the week. And one other thing I've been excited about that we've been doing with these guys is a Discord hang every Friday, super informal, just chilling, doing a few drafts, talking shop, all that good stuff. We're actually going to go do that right now. But anything else on your guys' radar, let people know your weekly schedule. You guys are streaming. You guys are 5 days a week, right? Monday through Friday.
We're trying. We're trying.
Yep.
Yeah.
Beast.
it's a little random right now. We aim for that 9 p.m. or 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern every single day, but then we try not to overlap with Splash Play, Lulls, and Herzig on Thursday and you on Friday. So like we kind of like this balancing act when we get guests and stuff. But temporarily right now we've been aiming for 12 p.m. Eastern every day.
Love it.
Time
Love
zones are
it.
beating your ass, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, make sure you guys are subscribed to the Badge Bros. I got the links down below for their channel, their Twitter. We also got some merch up in the store if you guys want to get your Badge Bro
Oh, there
shirts.
it is.
Yeah,
Nez.
Nez is.
Oh,
Nez is-
shoot. I didn't even realize. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there you go. Looking good. We also have a badge one. And as I always say to everyone, if there's other specific things you guys want those on, like a hoodie or a hat, just let me know. Fairly easy to spin that up for you guys. And yeah, we're going to go hang in the Discord a little bit. The link down below to the Deposit Kingdom Discord. You'll see the Badge Bros channel in there. But I appreciate you guys jamming with us today. Love what you guys are doing. Love having you guys in the Deposit Kingdom Discord. So for John, for Nez, for Neumy, I'm Pete. We'll see you guys in the Discord here.